You're listening to episode 208 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. And Ron, we've got a special guest today. We're getting fancy. We've got Matt Hammitt, who's the singer, songwriter, author, and former lead singer of Sanctus Real, which I'm sure a lot of folks have heard of.
Absolutely, and love Sanctus Real. They were at the D6 conference back in the early days in Dallas.
He's got a new book called Lead Me, Finding Courage to Fight for Your Marriage, Children, and Faith. Sounds like it's a slam dunk fit for D6 podcast.
It is, and let me just encourage you, if you are not familiar with the song, and I can't imagine anybody not being familiar, pull out and Google that song, read the lyrics. Jeremy, I know you're going to find this really amazing, but that song nearly brings me to tears when I'm just listening to it and thinking about it. It is convicting about, where we are, that human side of our relationships and our dependence.
For those who don't know, the song is Lead Me. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
I really want to play it right now just to see you cry on air.
Oh,
that would be,
yes.
Well, let our listeners listen to
hear the Kleenex is going up to my face up here.
Hear the puddles of tears.
Well, there's people out there that don't think I can cry.
Well, I would be one of them, Ron. Love to know that it's true, that your tear ducts work.
Oh man, it would. I appreciate that song more than they know. It is truly, truly powerful.
Ron.
Yes.
Hunter.
Yes.
When was the last time you cried?
Oh man, when's the last time I cried?
One of my favorite questions to ask people.
No, my wife and I, we do date night watching a couple of different TV shows. And I'm trying to remember what it was we were watching the other night, but I looked over at her and we both had tears rolling down our cheeks because of the show that we're watching, and I'm trying to remember honestly what it was.
It was probably This Is Us.
It was not This Is Us,
and
it wasn't a reality. It wasn't a reality show, but yeah, for sure. And what about you?
I'm gonna beg for some. I'm going to keep this theme going because I need some parenting advice, actually.
Oh, no.
And you have raised two kids rather successfully.
With a lot of minefields and missteps along the way, my friend.
So, and I'll protect my own son's privacy, and I won't say details, but let me ask if this scenario has happened, because it has happened to me recently, where you come upon, in a teenage years, you come upon hearing from a distance that your child is crying. How do you handle that? Do you give them the space and freedom to cry, or do you rush into the room, or do you? Because how do you handle those moments when they're not wanting to talk about it, but you can see they're hurting? What do you do?
Man, I think the first question I would have for you on that, Jeremy, is: are they alone and crying? Are you overhearing them in another room? And if you are, then I think I would have to poke my head in and find out, are they FaceTiming somebody, or in other words, are they on the phone with somebody? In other words, are they already dealing with this in the moment? And if I find out they're not, I think I would just, with the most tender-hearted approach, say, hey, is there anything I can do? Do you need me to listen? And let them decide whether or not we spend any more time together in that moment or not. And if they look and they shake their head no, then say, hey, I'll check back in with you in a bit. And just leave it open-ended and circle back around.
I like it. See? You never know what I'm going to throw at you.
No, you don't. What?
Well, I actually
How did it play out?
You understand this. We want to
Yeah.
be respectful to our kids and not.
Yeah.
Be,
Oh yeah.
But I'll just say this. I did kind of what you said, and it was a lesson for me because I'm very passionate about being a dad. So I want to be up in their business on every little thing and be able to speak into every little thing and infuse faith into every little thing. But I just got a sense in my spirit that this was one of those moments where I had to let them have their moment and let them know that I'm available. And yes, multiple times ask, how you doing? Because they don't know that I heard.
Right.
So
now, did you have an inkling? I don't even know if people know what that word means, but did you have an idea of what the emotional moment was about that gave you assurance to give him space, or did you totally not know and you were still okay with giving him that space?
Yeah, so it was one of those scenarios where it was out of the blue for me.
Okay.
So,
and that's hard for us when we don't know. It really is, and I would dare say it's maybe even harder for moms sometimes. Just the stereotypical reaction that moms have versus dads would, again, like people blame me for being cold-hearted when I have some warmth deep down somewhere in there. But yeah, it is. So we've got to remind ourselves that we are trying to help our kids as they grow older to handle things on their own, and knowing that balance of when to go in and handle it for them versus letting them work through it.
Because that can
break
break trust.
What are the repercussions? Yeah.
That's what I think was the warning in my spirit was, if you rush into this moment, especially I have boys, so if you rush into this moment, you're going to first of all probably embarrass.
Yeah. That's why I asked if he was alone or not, because
yeah.
I wouldn't want to do that in a crowd. That would be a different scenario.
Yeah, and if you rush into this moment, you are forcing yourself into something that you weren't invited to.
Yeah.
But then the fears set in of, well, also, this could be serious. Who knows what could be happening?
Yeah.
And dadgummit, he probably needs some help and support. Right. But the whisper, and this is where this is the transferable principle I would say to anybody that's listening, that I have learned, and I feel like you have said in a way too, is just you got to trust the Spirit. You got to trust the whispers of the Spirit in your heart as a parent, and in that moment, do what's best, but always follow up and be present, and that's what we've done. Trust me, the sensors come on and you're way more sensitive to them in the following days, trying hard to engage conversation, assuming that at some point they're going to want to talk. And they have. We have been able to have some conversations. So okay. So tears, crying, all of these things. You're just a puddle of tears over here today, Ron. But as far as our guest, Matt Hammitt, he will be with us here in a second. One of the things that is not going to make anybody shed tears, because it's a great thing that you're offering. I'm trying to transition. But we kind of have it down for you to share a little bit with folks about D6 Plus. I know you guys are doing a lot of cool stuff with that.
It is. And no, I'm sorry I missed that clue, Jeremy, in there.
I was trying to transition smoothly. Didn't work, but let's just go ahead anyway.
Sensitive to the tears, but not sensitive to the clues. The issues that Jeremy's talking about here are the little challenges, the little items that we as parents, I don't care how much we have experience at parenting or how far along our kids are, we're always bumping into things that we need to know other people's thoughts on how to handle them. I always tried to have a set of parents that were 2 to 3, 4 years further down the road with their kids than we were. And I'd say, hey, this is happening. How did you handle that? And, sometimes you have people around you like that you can really trust, and other times you don't. Or sometimes you have that problem. It would be really good to have a resource to go to and go, oh, I'm dealing with X problem. Like, how do I share with my son why people are, dying of this virus out there in our world? How do I explain terrorism? How do I explain, bullying? Or how do I explain any of these items? And we can talk to other parents and get opinions, but we have access to D6 Plus. And if your church is a member, then you have a whole library of about 300 of those topics where How do you talk to your kids when they're crying? How do you explain death? How do you explain when mom and dad's getting a divorce? All those issues are in there, and you can just type it out by subject matter, pull it up, and be able to shoot that help to the parent. And believe me, it's written on such an easy level that a parent can pick it up and easily share those points and insights with their kids, talking through it. And it will be from a biblical perspective, not just hey, another set of parents are going through this. This is their opinion. You're really good at that, Jeremy. You know how to transfer, and this is a whole library of transferable topics. And you can give your leaders in your church access to it with a password. That's just one element. There's 4 different sections in there, 5 different counting the one we just talked about, which is the toolbox. We've got videos from all of our conference speakers, MP3s. We have countdown videos. We have lesson starters. We have volunteer and teacher training videos that are 3 to 5 minutes long with emails that you write. If you're a regular listener, you've heard us talk about the service before, and maybe you've just not pulled the trigger to check it out. I would say join. Jeremy, you told me something a long time ago I never forgot. You said, I love the approach that whenever I offer people my services, I don't force a contract. I go month to month. If I don't earn their services, then they can cancel at any time because there's no value there. That's how D6 Plus has been from the origination. Sign up to be a member. If you don't think it's worth the value, you cancel at any time. There's not a year-long contract or 6 months or anything.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, after the break, we're going to talk to Matt Hammitt. He's going to talk about his new book, Lead Me, Finding Courage to Fight for Your Marriage, Your Children, and Your Faith. You'll enjoy it. Come back with us after the break. We'll have Matt Hammitt.
Are you looking for the right conference to attend this year? The D6 Conference is a family ministry conference designed for your entire ministry team. Come hear from over 30 speakers and network with churches that share your passion for reaching families. Family ministry isn't just another program. It's one of the most important things your church can do to make a difference in your city. At the D6 Conference, you'll be inspired and equipped to take your family ministry to the next level. To learn more about the D6 Conference, just go to d6conference.com.
Joining me today is a man whose voice you've heard many times on your radio. Matt Hammitt is a Grammy-nominated singer and former frontman of the band Sanctus Real. He's written hits like I'm Not All Right, Forgiven, and the ever-convicting song Lead Me. He's also the author of a new book, Lead Me, Finding Courage to Fight for Your Marriage, Children, and Faith. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, David.
So you've built this career as an incredible singer and songwriter. You've written so many #1 hits, and yet now you've kind of jumped into the book world. What made you want to write a book about your life and about Sanctus Real and just kind of your history of what's gone on?
Yeah, I spent 20 years writing, taking messages or life stories and trying to pack them into a 4-minute song. And probably I would say probably about 10 years ago, I just started having the desire to kind of unpack that message a little bit. I started doing some more speaking, started writing some more blogs, doing some articles for people, and started getting this dream that I really wanted to be able to expand this message in a book and share the heart of, this song that so many people know and so many people ask me about. And I see so many people have the same struggles of the tension between, work and family. And I just thought, man, it'd be amazing for me to be able one day to share this whole story. And I just felt there were things that I learned too, especially even with young guys. And of course, there's guys of all ages who are going through this stuff, but I specifically even thought of young guys who are, kind of starting out on this road. And, what could I say? What could I impart that I learned over the years that might help them? And so it's been almost 10 years in the making, different parts of this book. And so it's exciting to finally have it done.
And one thing that's always stood out to me about you and your time with Sanctus Real, you really poured raw honesty and vulnerability into your lyrics. Songs like I'm Not All Right just didn't exist in Christian music, and especially not on Christian radio at the time. you've taken that same honesty and vulnerability and you've applied it to your book. And for those that haven't read it yet, I mean, you really lay it all out there. What made you want to be so transparent with your readers?
Yeah, I don't think anything's worth doing, man, honestly, unless, you're vulnerable. I think a big message in the book is that very message that, it's like I don't trust people until they're willing to show me what's really behind the mask. There's a line in the book about, it's like if you want my trust, then then show me your scars, right? It's like that's how I really feel. Like if I want people's trust, then I'm gonna have to show them something they know is real. And so that's from the get-go, was a goal of mine. And one of the strengths that my wife brings to our marriage, is that vulnerability as well. She's like next level. Like she says stuff that I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. But what she does is she challenges me. I'll read her what I'm writing and she'll say, man, I think you need to go deeper. I think you need to be even more honest. I think you need to be more vulnerable. Why aren't you saying this? Or why aren't you sharing this? And so she's challenged me along the way to keep going deeper and keep telling the truth in a way that will connect people to the heart of the message and the heart of things that we all feel. And because it's like I really did feel like if I'm gonna write this book, I have to show people like this is not just a book I decided to write because we had a hit song. Like it's funny because I almost didn't want to call it Lead Me because I didn't want people to think I was just doing that typical thing of like, well, we've got a song, let's just write a book, right? Like the publisher hires a writer. I didn't want people to think that. But my publisher was like, look, you got one shot to to let people know this is the message in this book. But the heart of it, I knew from the beginning, had to be crystal clear and transparent that this is a real journey.
Yeah, I think the book almost needs a warning on the front for parents. Like I'm a new father, I'm a husband. Um, I was thinking this book is just going to be about, the kind of the songwriting process, how it came about. Man, I started reading it and it's heavy. And there are times I found myself just as a father thinking, man, I got to put this book down for a little bit. There's so much weight here and so much to chew on and think about. And other times I found myself getting choked up. It's not your typical Christian living book. It is so challenging and raw in places that it hits you in the heart. And it's something that's needed. I want to talk to you about something that's in the book. It's kind of something, maybe now it's on the lighter side. I'm sure at the time it wasn't. But we all have this idea of what a rock star is and what this rock star lifestyle is, but you kind of dispel that myth in your book. You were nominated and won Dove Awards. You've been to the Grammys. You had all these accolades. You've been on MTV with your music videos. And yet in the book, you talk about how you were really living less like a rock star and more kind of like a youth pastor on a never-ending missions trip. Can you take us inside that world of a traveling artist and kind of give us a glimpse of what reality is like?
Yeah, it's so funny, man. I actually had Jason Roy, who sings for Building 429, read the book a couple months ago, and he was like, "Bro, I felt like I was reading my life." Like, I do think people like that are gonna get a kick out of it because it definitely pulls back the screen. Like people think if you've got a video on somewhere, TMTV or a song on the radio, you must be rock star rich, or you're living it up. But it was quite the opposite for us. I mean, for all those years that we were in Sanctus Real, it was like just trying to grow and expand our business as we were trying. Like we got into it because we were kids who like wanted to share this message. We believed in it. It was like just our heart. And then like you realize like, oh man, if we want to actually grow out here, we've got to keep investing in more production and more people. But at the beginning, when there wasn't that any money at all, it was like we did everything ourselves and made no money. And I think even 4 records in the book, at one point I'm adding up the hours that I've spent away from home on the road between driving, loading gear, tearing down gear, performing, hanging out with people, meeting friends and fans and all the stuff that goes into it, recording, promotion. And I added it up and it was like, I could have made way more money working at McDonald's. And that's just like a hard, reality. And it took us literally from 1996, when we were sophomores in high school, and we met and we started Sanctus Real. Then we went out and got signed in 2001. It wasn't until 2011 that we actually started feeling like we could breathe, because we were making enough financially to actually feel like we weren't worried about how we were going to provide for our families.
Wow. Yeah, for all those people that think that Sanctus Real was flying around on private jets, it's kind of sobering to read that really you guys were sleeping on the floor of 15-passenger vans going across the country.
For most of our career. Yeah, it wasn't until it took us till 2010. So 14 years of being a band, 10 years of being on the road before we even were able to be on a bus.
Man. Well, one thing that you bring up in the book, you talk about just being away from home quite a bit, being away from your wife, and you discuss the loneliness that set in for you and your wife. What was the wake-up call for you with that, and how did you get things back on the right track?
Yeah, I would say from the time my wife left the road, she was with us for 4 years. And then from that time, when we had our first baby, we had our first daughter, who's 14 now, crazy enough. There was that restlessness inside of me. Like, I immediately started to feel at odds with being a young man, starting a family, and then also having a career dream. And so it was like that tension was very, very present. And it was very lonely, very difficult for Sarah to be at home alone with our daughter. And then over the course of the next couple of years, growing family. And for me to be out on the road 200 plus days out of the year. And it's interesting because as that restlessness grew, I think for both of us, and our family life was obviously out of whack because I'm not there, right? Like she married me because she wanted to be with me. She married me because she wanted to have a family with me. And the same for me. I married her because I wanted to have a companion and do life together and grow a family and all those dreams that we had. And it was just like for the machine, of the band. And I'm not blaming anybody. This is nobody's fault. Like, I don't want to point the finger at anybody. It's just the nature of when we just kind of let the snowball keep building and rolling, right? And we see the growth and we're excited about it growing. So we don't want to say no to things. We want to take every opportunity. And when there's a fire, you want to throw fuel on it. And what I realized over time was my family is getting all the seconds and they never come first. And my wife had every reason to feel as though she was second fiddle to the band. And I came to a point where we were both it was really after we experienced the trauma of having our third son, our third baby, Bowen, and when going through 2 open heart surgeries, being in the hospital for 5 months, all while we were knowing I was going to have to jump right back on the road because it took all that time off, and we had to make money to eat, right? So that was the point when it really started getting dark for us, because now add a sick kid into the mix, add the grief of still not just the grief of everything we experienced in the hospital, which was really traumatic for us, and not just with our son, but also watching other kids die. And now we're grieving separately and differently, and it's pulling us apart more and more. The irony of all that is, at that time, we're coming off Lead Me, a song I had written about being a more present husband and father. It's number 1 on the radio. And the success of the song Lead Me is actually the thing that is pulling me further away from home. And man, you want to talk about irony, man. It was hard. And there was a time when I just remember, if I'm to look at one time that I can remember so clearly, that was just, it made me go, something has to change, was we were on the bus getting ready for a show, and it was like World War III broke out on the telephone between me and my wife. We could not resolve this conflict. And it was so agonizing for whatever reason that day, to the point where she said, look, I don't even want you to come home. When you get back to Toledo, you're going to stay out in the studio, and I don't even want you to come back in the house. And it just, my heart broke. I was like, I kind of felt like, how did we get here? But I kind of knew how we got there. We were both angry. And so I just said, fine, you know what, let's not talk anymore. I turned my phone off, and I'm thinking like, I'm just gonna leave my phone off. I was being so immature about it. And, and we got back on the bus after the show. Well, first I should say I went in the front lounge. Was like, guys, I just want to tell you, Sarah said she doesn't want me to come back to the house, and I made this big deal about it, and I'm in tears, and the guys feel horrible, and we have to play a show like this and hang out with people afterwards. I get back on the bus, and Mark's like, our drummer, he's like, man, you got to turn your phone back on, bro. And so I turn it back on, and the first text comes through that would have been 5 minutes after I turned my phone off, and it said, I'm sorry, I love you, I didn't mean it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I just like told everybody Sarah doesn't want me to come home. I just was miserable this whole night on stage. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was just like, something for us to get to this place, like it was a wake up call for me, because I thought to myself, well, that's nice that this time I got the text. Like I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. I know we're upset. But what happens when we're stretched so far that everything actually breaks? I'm like, I don't want to wait around to find out what that's going to be like. Yeah. And I think that was the beginning of me going like, I think I have some hard choices to make.
Now, from an outsider's perspective, I'm sure people look at you and say, wow, you're living the life. You're this rock star. Lead Me's hit #1. It went there and stayed there for 9 straight weeks. You're making millions of dads cry with a song on the radio. But you mentioned what you're going through with Bowen. Can you take us through kind of what that went through with his heart defect, and just kind of how your family was feeling at the time? And because that really took you from, at least from an outsider's perspective, not the musician, but this is a father who's dealing with this.
Yeah. Crazy thing is that Pieces of a Real Heart, Sanctus Real's 5th album, released in March of 2010. 1 month later, we found out that our baby's heart, who was only 19 weeks old, still in Sarah's belly, that his heart was broken. It was crazy because on the cover of that album we just put out was a tattered heart, and there were all these songs about Jesus keep my heart alive, and lines, you can make a weak heart stay alive forever. Heart was like all over this album. And so it was like there's kind of this weird parallel stories happening again with this family thing and with the career thing. And so we found out in April he had half of a heart, called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. The doctors told us that, actually we had several doctors tell us that we should terminate our pregnancy, which really broke my heart. It made me angry as a dad too, because I'm like, what makes you think I wouldn't want my son because he's disabled? And I don't say it to shame anybody out there who's been pressured and made that choice. I'm just saying it for me. I'm like, man, I believe that every single child is made in the image of God and is a gift that is meant to be celebrated, whether we have a 1 minute or I don't know. And I think the fact that we were facing just this difficulty of like doctors telling us our life could be horrible. And then we're waiting from April to September. And then he's born in September. And besides having half a heart, he looked absolutely perfect. But we had known leading into that we were going to have to do 2 major open heart surgeries in the first year of his life, and then another later. And so, right at the time, literally that Lead Me was going #1, I was at my son's bedside in the hospital after his first open heart surgery. And that first night that he had that surgery, he had a cardiac arrest. And we almost lost him. It was one of the longest nights of my life. And so, we're nominated for a Grammy, and I'm still in the hospital. And I'm like, man, I mean, it's just so weird because I've got everything career-wise that I ever could have wanted happening. But in that moment, it was like, I didn't even care. I mean, I cared. I mean, I'm so grateful, but I didn't, it's like, I just wanted my son to live. And so now we're just that was really hard for those 5 months because we really fought for his life. There were multiple times where he stroked, he almost died, he had a cardiac arrest, almost died. And it was just up and down, this roller coaster. Our girls were staying with the grandparents, and our family felt torn apart. And like I said, we made all these friends in the hospital that we were fighting alongside with, and we had to watch multiple friends walk out of the hospital without a child in their arms. And it just felt like a war, kind of like being in a war. And, we're so grateful for all those nurses and doctors and all the prayer warriors and people praying for us, because that carried us, man, through all that. God carried us with those people's help, because I don't know, man, it's one of the darkest seasons of my life. But I will say this, I've never learned more. And in that, we know, like, suffering, or Romans 5, right? Suffering, the Bible tells us, produces character and perseverance and hope. And even though it was so dark, one interesting thing to wrap this up, it was so dark, but man, I've never felt God more than in my need for him during that time. He used that to really produce so much in me. And I felt like walking out of there that maybe I was kind of spiritually on top of the world because I felt so close to God. But it kind of like made me believe that, like, okay, like, we're through this. But little did I know that there would be another year or two of my life that would be just as hard, if not harder.
Well, can you give us a little bit of an update on how Bowen's doing, and not just medically, but also, I mean, you've got a kid that's a star. Can you tell us about his career that's kicked off?
It's kind of crazy, man. Yeah, people love Bowen, man, and there's good reason why. He is this kid who walks out of these surgeries in this condition smiling. He loves to sing. And just this past July, we made it through his third major open heart surgery. Through all that, we actually did a documentary that we're finishing up right now called Bowen's Heart. And kind of documented some of us, like, recording some of his music and going through his heart surgery. And but there's this one line in there, man, where people are like, well, what do you like about your life? And he says, I love my brothers and sisters, my mom and dad. And he goes to this whole list and he says that I'm healthy. I'm laughing so hard because that's just his outlook on life, man. Like, he feels healthy, even though he's had 3 major open heart surgeries. And that's the spirit that he exudes when he sings, and he writes these songs as a 9-year-old that sound like something I would have written in high school or even now. I mean, it's crazy, being able to put out music for him. And now, we just did this. So February is Heart Month, and there's a CHD, Congenital Heart Disease Awareness Week, coming up. And so we did a big partnership with the Heart Strong. It's a foundation that works with kids with heart disease. And we did a big music video and a launch with that. And it's like, it is crazy to watch him just find a voice and find people, like, really drawn to what he's doing. And I couldn't be more proud. I love it when I just get to step out of the way and let him shine. I spent too many years right there in the center stage. I am more than ready to step aside and just let the light shine on this kid, man. It's a gift.
That's awesome. And I would encourage our listeners, go look him up, find his music and listen to it. It is impressive. I mean, for a kid that's not even 10, it's impressive. For someone that's 25, it's impressive. There's so much depth there and just incredible talent. Check it out. And I do want to ask you now, because you're no longer with Sanctus Real. So what does your ministry look like now that you've left the band?
Yep. So, I alluded earlier, for people who don't know the whole story, that something was shifting and changing. I had to make a hard decision. So in 2015, I made the decision to give the band one more year. Stepped away in 2016, really not knowing at all what I would do. I mean, I really felt like I had some ideas, like I had some messages God had put in my heart around the Lead Me messages, and I started a men's conference, and I did that it went great. I did that for the first year here and there. I took my family around the country, actually with me in an RV for a year, and we just had an adventure, and we stopped and did these conferences along the way. But then I got a call. I got a couple calls, actually, that God just provided. Family Life Ministries out of Little Rock, Arkansas, called me and asked if I'd be willing to speak a few times a year at their Weekend Remember Marriage conferences, which I was really excited to get the opportunity to do. And then Kirk Cameron called and asked if I'd be part of his Living Room Reset events, marriage and parenting events that we do about 35 a year. And it's just been crazy, you know. I've still made some music. I've done a lot of writing. There's a lot of artists that people hear on Christian radio that I've written songs for them. And I've also put out an album of my own in 2017. But it's interesting with this book coming out, and the more I've been doing family and marriage related and men's related articles, I'm getting more and more calls just to really go out and speak, which has been really great for me. Just signed on for Promise Keepers Canada for a couple big events this fall and next spring, and some men's conferences. And so I'm going out with Kirk Cameron here in a few weeks for his Living Room Reset events again. So it's really kind of a hodgepodge of writing, speaking. I'm working on this documentary called Bowen's Heart with my wife, and I get to like do the music for that. And so I'm still using music and all these things that kind of God has put in our family story. We're learning how, as a family, we're learning how to do ministry together, which to me is leading into the most exciting season of my life.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, I have a few rapid fire questions for you before we go.
Sure.
Just quick, and let's just kind of go off the wall here. What artist do you get most mistaken for?
Jeremy Camp.
Okay, that makes me feel so much better because a couple years ago I ran into him in Target in Franklin, and I almost went up to him and said, "Man, I love Sanctus Real so much," and I caught myself before I did.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
that makes me feel better. Thank you for that.
Yep.
I was hoping for that. I was fishing for that. Of all the Sanctus Real songs, what song are you happiest to never have to play again?
Oh man, that's a good one. Whoa, that's hard. I actually loved I actually loved performing all the Sanctus Real songs. I know it sounds like a crummy answer because I wish I could give you one, but those guys were like such a joy to play with musically that I can't think of one. Actually, no, there is one. There's a song called "Take Over Me" that was on our sixth album. That was one of the most rockin', fun live songs that we ever had. We kicked off Winter Jam 2012 with it. And the funny thing is, though, is it tore my voice up so bad that I hated singing it.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was fun.
Well, not really.
Yeah.
Who wins in an arm wrestling contest? You or Bart from Mercy Me?
Oh man, I'd kick Bart's rear all day.
Perfect. And
I hope he's
finally,
listening.
true or false? If people don't purchase Lead Me, they will regret it for the rest of their lives.
Oh, absolutely, no question.
That is true. All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. His new book is called Lead Me, Finding Courage to Fight for Your Marriage, Children, and Faith. Go pick it up where books are sold. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Hey, and one more thing I just want to say, if people want to follow along, it's just Matt Hammitt on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and or matthammitt.com. You can find everything there.
Awesome. Thanks
Thanks
a lot.
so much. Yeah, thank you, David.
All right, thank you to Matt. And thank you, by the way, always we want to say thank you to David Jones for when he jumps in and does interviews. Great job, sir. Just, again, while during that interview, Ron's just sitting here crying. It's really embarrassing.
I'm not crying, but I did pull out the lyrics of the song because I just wanted to share a few of the lines with Jeremy. But, man, so powerful. Buy this book. Download the song. Download the album for that matter, but you just pour that into your marriage because they are worth fighting for.
Mm. Were you going to read lyrics? I don't.
No.
Just...
Then I will cry. I'm not going to do that.
Okay. Well, at this point in the podcast, if you're all the way here, we want to thank you and always remind you, if you are willing and able, you can go to iTunes and leave a review. That actually really, really helps us. Number one, it encourages us to kind of keep going and keep pushing. And, man, we've done 208 episodes, so this has been something, a gift we've tried to give you for a long time. So if you've enjoyed it, we'd appreciate a review on iTunes. But other than that, thank you so much for listening. Next week, we have Jana Magruder. Who in the world is that, Ron?
Oh, man.
I'm just kidding. I know Jana.
You know Jana, but for our listeners, she is a absolute guru of all things children's ministry.
Mm-hmm. Can we call her the Queen of VBS? Should we do that?
We might could.
I mean, she's pretty good at it.
Yes, she is, and she's a great speaker. And she doesn't just speak from from just novelty. She speaks from research. And I think that's where this interview was going, if I remember right from what you shared with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So next week we'll have Jana Magruder. We hope you guys have a great day, and we hope you have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.